Most indie films don't sell, or at least they don't sell at the level that you might hope. And almost every filmmaker I speak to has a theory about why. We just missed out on a major festival. Our timing was a bit off. The sales agent didn't push hard enough. Our distributor didn't even care about the film. The market's dead out there. Streamers ruined everything. And of course, AI is coming. Sometimes those things are true, but most of the time, you didn't lose your film once it got to the marketplace. You lost it earlier, like way, way earlier. You lost it in development, even at concept stage. And that's uncomfortable because it means that the outcome was largely locked in before anyone even watched a screener. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the 5 mistakes filmmakers make that result in an unsold indie film. I'm also going to use the mental model of inversion to tell you what decisions you would make to ensure that your film does sell. So let's get into it. Mistake number 1 is that you never clearly defined the buyer for your film. So a lot of indie films are kind of built like this. You write the script, you raise the money, you go shoot the film, you finish it, and you hope someone buys it. But no one ever clearly answers the question of who is the audience for this? Which buyers serve that audience? What recent title from those buyers proves that there is demand? And why would they actually feel urgency around your film over other films? So if you can't name like 3 realistic buyers before you raise $1, you're not building a commercial project from the outset. And better yet, if you can't lock in a local distributor, an international sales agent, and ideally some pre-sales on your film, then you may find that the film doesn't have the appeal that you thought it did. So if you think about it, a property developer does not design a 50-story glass tower and then check whether the neighborhood can support the rent, right? Of course not. It's ludicrous. So they go and check the market first, they prove the demand, and then they go and invest and build. As producers, we should be doing the same thing. So let's invert this. If you wanted to ensure that your film did sell, at a minimum, you would have a clearly defined audience. You would know which buyers serve that audience, and you'd be able to point to recent examples of those buyers proving the demand. And better yet, you would lock in domestic distribution, international sales, and some pre-sales. Mistake number 2, you confused festival strategy with sales strategy. Now, I see this constantly, and I've been guilty of it myself. When you start out, you don't really understand distributors and sales agents and who does what, and you don't really know who's who in the zoo of the film industry. You're kind of just trying to make your damn film and get it into Cannes. So the film gets designed around this idea of this feels like a Sundance film. This feels like a Cannes film. When I made my second film, West of Sunshine, we literally said it felt like a Venice film. And guess what? It got into Venice. But guess what else happened? Festivals are actually just cultural events, not commercial outcomes. So the film struggled to sell and only reached a very small audience. Now, let's be clear. Festivals do serve a purpose, right? They do create prestige. They create some credibility. They act as a launching pad. Prestige and those things can help sales, but never mistake those things for demand, for audience demand. That's the golden rule, and that's a hard lesson that I've learned. So if your entire plan is, we'll premiere the film somewhere good, and that will trigger buyers, that's not actually a strategy. And you may get a rude shock, like I did, the day after the red carpet. All right, so let's invert this one. If you wanted to ensure that your film did sell, well, you wouldn't bank your entire commercial strategy on getting the film into a major festival. Festivals would be part of your release strategy for the film, right? Because you'd still want them to amplify your already commercially sound decisions and the film that you've made. So that's how you'd approach festivals. Mistake number 3 is you gave the sales agent nothing to actually amplify. So sales agents don't create demand for your film. They amplify your upstream decisions as a producer or a filmmaker. So demand has to be baked into the project from the jump. So this means decisions like recognizable cast, a clearly defined genre, a audience that is hungry for that type of film or product, strong comparables that you can point to, a hooky marketable log line, right? Something that you can pitch in one sentence that instantly grabs buyers and equally allows them to go and pitch the film really easily. So if none of those are strong, it's almost impossible for the sales agent to turn your film into a hit. It's hard for them to turn the tide at that point. You know, they're not magicians. They can't manufacture urgency and demand where none actually exists to begin with. So let's invert this one. To ensure that your film does sell, you make a film in a clearly defined commercial genre. I'm thinking like action, horror, sci-fi, with some level of recognizable cast, which I understand isn't always possible, right? But you do the best there. You have a really hooky, marketable logline, ideally something that's high concept, and you have a defined audience. You do those things, and the sales agent simply pours fuel on those decisions when it comes time for them to go and sell your film. Mistake number 4 is you're competing in a power law market, but you're acting like it's a normal market. So let me explain this. You've probably heard me talk about this before, this concept of film existing in like a power law environment. So films are not normally distributed. They are power law driven. So a tiny number of indie films do things like break out of major festivals, trigger bidding wars, win major awards, and travel globally on the festival circuit and then in terms of distribution. But the vast majority of films actually cluster around small territory deals with low MGs or no sale at all. Now, that's not some kind of moral judgment about your film. It's actually just a structural relationship that governs movie economics. So it's important to understand that there's this overarching kind of structural relationship, this power law that governs the market that we work in, which is it's hit driven, right? Winner takes all environment. So we're not competing in a market where if you make an average film, you get an average outcome. You're competing, like I said, in a winner takes all environment. So if your film doesn't break out, the default outcome isn't that you get like modest success. Sometimes it can mean that it's an absolute flop. And that's a really harsh reality, but it is a reality. So let's invert this because it is a little bit harder to invert because we can't actually just break the power law. We can't say, okay, we're in a power law environment and we're just going to move to another one. Can't do that, right? But if you know you're working and you're creating products that are going out into that environment, the best thing that you can do is price your film according to its risk-adjusted packaging, right? So you price the film according to the genre you have, the cast that you have, and the director that you have in order to minimize your downside risk and maximize your upside potential. So you basically ensure that you don't overcapitalize the film relative to all those parts of the package that you have. Mistake number 5 is that you thought good was actually enough. But most indie films are decent enough. Most people know how to execute a production, right? They're well shot, well acted, sincere in their intentions. But decent enough doesn't really cut it in this winner takes all environment, right? Because really it's just the winners who break through. So the market's going to judge your film however it likes. Buyers move when they feel, like I said, there's a clear audience, there's specific buyers. It has elements that can travel. That's why genres like horror, action travel really well. They're like language agnostic. And they have breakout potential, right? So they don't move, buyers don't move because something is like a respectable film, a well-made film. They may not even move because something is great. Like I mentioned earlier, we had a film play at Venice, still struggled when it came to sales, right? They move because a film is exceptional, either in its execution or in its positioning. So let's invert this. Make an exceptional film, which sounds simple, right? But obviously not easy to do. Or you can make an okay film, but ensure that the positioning is exceptional. That means it has a clear, broad audience with high demand. And that's where it's more forgiving, right? So for example, if you choose like an action or a horror film, the quality of the film can be a little bit more forgiving because your positioning is so exceptional if you get your audience right. So the uncomfortable conclusion is this: most indie films don't get sold because the commercial strategy was never really embedded in the development process. It was kind of thought of after and retrofitted, right? They were all built as creative projects first, and then the commercial logic like gets retrofitted later. So you can't fix structural positioning problems at the sales stage. They have to be fixed while you're writing the script, or even coming up with the idea, or if you've been pitched an idea, deciding whether you're going to get involved in that film. That's where the sale is actually made, and this has taken me a long time to realize this. It's long before finance is raised. It's long before your screenings. That's when the decisions really count. So if you found this useful, hit subscribe because this is what we talk about here: how films actually get made, how they get financed, how they sell. I'll see you on the next one.